When did you lose your innocence? Serious. When I was 8. My best friend wasn't paying attention as we walked along a rural road and stepped in front of a log truck. She amazingly survived but lost one leg and was paralyzed from the chest down, plus had some residual cognitive deficits. My world was pretty idyllic in our small mountain town up until that point. I still remember it down to the nanosecond. When I was 9. I was forced to watch pornography and do things by a friend who emotionally abused and threatened me if I ever told anyone. When I got divorced, was a single dad paying alimony and child support while having my baby son with me 6 nights per week. I was 25. A religious teacher told me that Jesus was dead and it was my fault personally. He was using our religion to punish me for misbehaving as a child. I realized at that moment that adults were people and capable of deeply cruel and malicious actions for relatively petty reasons. When I was bullied heavily starting from the 8th grade all the way to graduation until I almost killed myself. Then the trend continued in the military until I had a mental breakdown and got discharged. I'm on the spectrum and I have PTSD. I fucking despise most people and they make me miserable. I've learned from a myriad of terrible experiences that most out there are not good people. All they care about is status and power. When I was 7 and a family member held a shotgun to my face. It had been chipped away at during the physical abuse leading up to it. But something in me changed that day. I'm currently regaining that innocence now. It's a journey, but it's possible. If you were to ask my parents, it would have been when I had to have some major surgery as a baby. My personality changed and I no longer trusted people so readily. I became introverted. If you were to ask me, it would have been when I began experiencing sexual abuse in early childhood. In grade 1 we learned what to do if someone tried to touch us, but having already had it happen I was sitting there thinking how that doesn't work. When my dad died, me and my brother watched him get carried out of the house on a stretcher. We prayed for him to be okay, but it was cancer and he had been deteriorating for a while. Never even got to say goodbye. When at age 8 my dad tried to kill me. I watched him throw my mom down the stairs before that. I was about 13 years old and I saw a video of terrorists beheading an American journalist. I couldn't believe what I saw. I was shocked for several months. I never saw life the same way. 3 weeks after I was born my father strangled my mother to the point that she passed out. When she awoke she called the cops and he was put in jail. Somehow I still ended up living with him for 14 years where he consistently abused both my mother and I physically and mentally. I don't remember a time where I was innocent. My gut reaction was when I was 4 to 5. Started getting sexually abused by a family member. But then I thought about it, and I really haven't lost my innocence. There are still some things I treat with a silly childlike worldview, puppies, cartoons, people being in love, etc. I never really purposefully held on to that way of looking at things. I just think that way of looking at things is a part of who I am, and nothing will really take it away. Bit of a late bloomer, 13. Started in a private school with a scholarship and was bullied for being from the poor part of town. Abducted, sexually abused and attempted murder at 13 will do it. Didn't do much for my mental health for 25 years but enough therapy you get there. After I was molested by a bunch of boys playing truth or dare. Daring each other to touch me. I was 5, they were big, I was scared. Women shrugging, it is what it is. I experienced abuse that made me think I was going to die sometime before I started school, so younger than 5. I don't know how old exactly. When my alcoholic grandfather asked my sister, at Christmas dinner, if she washed her P*SSY real good when she showered. I was in elementary school. It wasn't the only time he said horribly sexually inappropriate things to us kids. I went to a class after spending time with 2 friends. They were at that class too and they sat in front of me, although they didn't know I was sitting right behind them. They just talked so much shit about me and I could hear all of it. That day I realized that you might think you trust someone but it doesn't really mean that you should. People act like they like you but that's not always true. When my uncle tried to throw my mother off the balcony, 3 stories up, when I was 7 in front of my 2 brothers, my cousin, and I after them fighting about something really stupid, The next day my mother was arrested for driving her car through a guard shack to a gated community where my father lived, with me in the car. Never been the same since those 2 days. When I was 13 and found out my GF and her sister were raped by their dad and had to live with him until CPS took them away. That and my best friend was living with gypsy parents and almost at the same time they all left me. When I came home one day when I was 8 and my dad left condoms on the counter and my mom found them, and then hearing her cry every single night for a year and a half until they finally got divorced and then got parentified until I moved out when I was 20. When my mom left and I put a blade to my wrist as a 8 to 9-year-old because if that, plus she was dating a neo-Nazi type dude, getting tattoos and getting drunk instead of taking care of her kids. Fun times. Being sad when I was 5. Then almost dying of a raging kidney infection caused by SAD just after I turned 6. Just before my 12th birthday. The morning my dad died. Every part of my world and my future changed that day. None of it for the better. Early in elementary school. Sexual abuse, emotional abuse. Dad walked out and didn't care about us at all. A classmate committing suicide by hanging himself. An uncle in and out of our lives because of drugs. As a kid I thought I was better prepared to face the world than my peers, but as an adult I realize how traumatic it all was. I actually still have my innocence and I would like to thank you for posting this. Reading some of the responses put into perspective how good I have it. I needed to see this right now. I often forget how many people have been dealt awful hands, and this actually helped put things into perspective for me. Happy kid. Normal childhood. Dreams. Aspirations. Optimism. Went to college. Began dating a beautiful girl from 18 to 21. Then in October of 2005 she was kidnapped and murdered. I've been severely broken ever since. There's one thing about answering this, there are 2 answers for me. One, when I started hanging out with my grandma's neighbor who was a year older than me and I was exposed to interesting things. 2, when I switched from a private Christian school I had been at my whole life, into a public school. Lost my mother at age 9, no siblings and birth father had not been part of my life since I was 4. My father died when I was 9, I didn't know what changed at the time. I came to realize that hope for the future was taken away from me. At 28, it's still hard to be optimistic. After my last relationship, which was beyond toxic and abusive, I had no idea people could be so god-awful to me. Getting the shit kicked out of me just about every day by a bully at the bus stop during 1st grade. Childhood hypersexuality that I was shamed for, starting around the time I was 4 and was inserting objects to the point I had to have surgery. I had to have a removal again when I was 10. I never received any kind of counseling or therapy to understand why I was doing it, just got made fun of by my mother and sister for the rest of my adolescence.